The sun was setting on Epsilon 7, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The small research outpost stood isolated on the barren planet, surrounded by endless stretches of rocky terrain and swirling dust storms. Inside the outpost, Dr. Carter sat at her desk in the medical bay, staring at a holographic screen that hovered above it. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she read the results displayed before her. The cub lay on an examination table nearby. It wasn't an ordinary animal. It was a genetically engineered feline hybrid designed to detect toxins in the air. Its sleek golden fur had turned dull and matted, and its breathing came in shallow gasps. Leaned closer, placing a gentle hand on the creature's side. She felt its ribs rise and fall unevenly, each breath more labored than the last. "This can't be happening," she whispered under her breath, but the diagnosis was clear. The cub's immune system had collapsed after being exposed to an unknown pathogen brought back accidentally by one of the survey teams. Without treatment, the cub would die within hours. Clenched her fists, trying to focus. There was no cure available at the outpost. The supplies they had were limited, meant only for basic injuries or minor illnesses. However, there was hope. If she could reach the enzyme stored aboard the orbiting supply station called the Aurora. The enzyme was rare but effective against immune disorders like the one attacking the cub. But reaching the Aurora would mean breaking quarantine protocols. For 6 months, the outpost had been sealed off from the outside world to prevent any contamination of Epsilon 7's fragile ecosystem. No one was allowed to leave without explicit permission from General Harold Briggs, the mission commander, and knew exactly how he would react if she asked. As if on cue, the door to the medical bay slid open with a hiss. General Briggs stepped inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. His face was red with anger, and his nose twitched involuntarily, a nervous habit he developed over years of high-stress situations. Behind him stood Lieutenant Rachel Dawson, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "What's going on here, Doctor?" Briggs demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through steel. "I just got reports that you're planning something reckless." Didn't look up immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath and turned to face him. "General, the cub is dying. If we don't act quickly, we'll lose it." Briggs scowled, stepping closer to the examination table. He glanced down at the cub, his expression softening for a moment before hardening again. "It's just an animal," he said dismissively. "We can't risk contaminating the entire mission for the sake of a pet." "It's not just a pet," snapped, surprising even herself with the intensity of her tone. She softened her voice but kept her gaze steady. "This cub is part of our early warning system. Without it, we won't know if dangerous toxins are present in the atmosphere. Losing it puts everyone at risk, not just now, but for the rest of the mission." Briggs' jaw tightened. He hated when people questioned his authority, especially in front of others. Rachel shifted uncomfortably behind him, avoiding eye contact with either of them. "You're talking about breaking quarantine," Briggs said slowly, enunciating every word. "Do you have any idea what that means? You'd be violating 3 laws of interstellar conduct. Do you want to throw away everything we've worked for?" "I'm not throwing anything away," replied firmly. "I'm trying to save lives, including yours. If the cub dies, so does our best chance of staying safe out here. I'm going to get that enzyme, General, with or without your permission." For a moment, the room fell silent. The hum of the medical equipment filled the space between them as tensions mounted. Finally, Briggs let out a frustrated growl and stormed out of the room, muttering something about insubordination under his breath. Rachel lingered for a second longer, giving a sympathetic look before following him. Alone again, turned back to the cub. Its eyes fluttered weakly as though it recognized her presence. She placed a comforting hand on its head, running her fingers through its fur. "I'm not letting you go," she murmured softly. "Not today." She began gathering supplies into a small backpack, medical tools, rations, and a handheld scanner programmed to locate the enzyme aboard the Aurora. Every movement was deliberate, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. Breaking quarantine wasn't just risky, it was dangerous. The general wouldn't hesitate to send someone after her if he found out, but didn't care. This wasn't just about saving the cub anymore. It was about proving that sometimes rules needed to be bent, or even broken, for the greater good. Outside the window, the twin moons of Epsilon 7 rose above the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. Zipped up her backpack and slung it over her shoulder. She glanced once more at the cub, then at the darkened hallway leading to the maintenance hatch. Somewhere out there, Alex Monroe was waiting for her. Together, they would make the impossible possible. With one final glance at the sleeping cub, slipped out of the medical bay and disappeared into the shadows of the outpost. The journey ahead would be perilous, but failure wasn't an option. Not this time. The outpost was quiet, its halls dimly lit by the soft glow of emergency lights. Moved swiftly through the corridors, her footsteps muffled by the thick soles of her boots. Her backpack weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she barely noticed. Her focus was sharp, her mind racing with every step she took toward the maintenance hatch. She knew this was her only chance to leave without being detected immediately. Alex Monroe waited for her near the hatch, crouched low in the shadows. He was younger than, his face still holding traces of boyishness despite the seriousness of their situation. When he saw her approach, he stood up and gave her a nervous smile. "You made it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Not yet," replied, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "We're not out of here until we're off this planet." Alex nodded and gestured toward the hatch. "It's unlocked, I checked earlier. No alarms either yet." Didn't waste time. She knelt down and began working on the manual override panel beside the hatch. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, bypassing the security protocols that would normally seal the door shut. Within moments, the hatch slid open with a faint hiss, revealing the cold, dark tunnel beyond. "Let's go," she said, stepping inside. Alex followed close behind, pulling the hatch shut after them. The narrow passage led downward, twisting and turning as it descended beneath the outpost. The air grew colder the farther they went, and the sound of their breathing echoed off the metal walls. At the end of the tunnel was a small launch pad hidden from view. A single-person shuttle sat idle, its sleek design blending seamlessly with the rocky terrain outside. Approached it cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of movement. Satisfied that they were alone, she climbed aboard and began powering up the systems. "This is insane," Alex muttered as he strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat. "Do you really think we can pull this off?" Finished entering the launch sequence and turned to look at him. "We don't have a choice. If we stay here, the cub dies. And if the cub dies, we all lose something far more important than just an animal." Before Alex could respond, the shuttle's engines roared to life, shaking the ground beneath them. Outside, the darkness of Epsilon 7's night sky stretched endlessly above them. As they prepared for liftoff, alarms began blaring inside the outpost. Red warning lights flashed across the control panels, alerting everyone to their unauthorized departure. General Briggs stormed into the command center moments later, his face flushed with anger. "What's going on?" he barked at Lieutenant Rachel Dawson, who was seated at the main console. "It's Carter," Rachel replied, her voice calm but tense. "She's taken a shuttle. Looks like she's heading for the Aurora." Briggs slammed his fist against the wall, his nose twitching furiously. "I knew she'd try something reckless, deploy a pursuit craft. I want her intercepted before she reaches orbit." Rachel hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, sir." She tapped a few commands into her console, and within seconds, another vessel launched from the outpost. It was faster and more agile than the shuttle had taken, giving its pilot a significant advantage. Inside the shuttle heard the distant roar of engines behind them. She glanced at the monitor and saw the pursuit craft closing in rapidly. "Hold on," she told Alex, gripping the controls tightly. "This is going to get rough." The chase began in earnest as the two ships darted through Epsilon 7's turbulent atmosphere, maneuvered the shuttle expertly, weaving between jagged cliffs and rocky outcroppings to throw off their pursuer. Each turn sent Alex gripping the armrests, his knuckles white with tension. "They're gaining on us," he shouted, pointing at the monitor. Sure enough, the pursuit craft was drawing closer, its weapon systems locking onto their position. Gritted her teeth, pushing the shuttle to its limits. She spotted an asteroid field ahead and veered toward it, knowing the dense cluster of rocks would provide some cover. The pursuit craft followed, its pilot unwilling to give up the chase. For several minutes, the two ships danced through the asteroids, dodging collisions and exchanging fire. The shuttle shuddered violently as a laser blast grazed its hull, but she refused to slow down. Instead, she used the chaos to her advantage, luring the pursuit craft into a trap. "There!" she exclaimed, spotting a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. With precise timing, she guided the shuttle through the opening, forcing the pursuit craft to either follow or retreat. The pilot chose the former, but misjudged the distance. There was a loud explosion as the craft collided with one of the asteroids, sending debris flying in all directions. Exhaled sharply, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. "That should buy us some time," she said, checking the monitors to ensure there were no other ships pursuing them. Alex stared at her in amazement. "How did you learn to fly like that?" "I didn't," admitted with a wry smile. "I just didn't have a choice." As the shuttle cleared the asteroid field, the vast emptiness of space opened up before them. In the distance, the aurora loomed large, its metallic surface gleaming faintly in the light of a nearby star. Set a course for the supply station, her heart pounding with anticipation. They were so close now, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead. "What happens when we get there?" Alex asked, breaking the silence. "We find the enzyme," replied simply, "and then we figure out how to get back without getting caught." Alex nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Still, he trusted. If anyone could pull this off, it was her. The shuttle continued onward, leaving the wreckage of the pursuit craft far behind. For the first time since they'd left the outpost, allowed herself to believe they might actually succeed. The cub's life depended on it, and so did the lives of everyone back at the outpost. Failure wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. The aurora loomed ahead, a silent sentinel drifting in the vast emptiness of space. Its metallic surface reflected the faint light of a distant star, making it look almost ghostly against the endless blackness. Guided the shuttle toward the supply station, her hands steady on the controls despite the tension coursing through her body. Alex sat beside her, his eyes glued to the monitors as they approached their destination. "This place gives me the creeps," Alex muttered, breaking the silence that had settled over the cabin. "It's so empty." "It's supposed to be," replied, keeping her focus on the docking sequence. "The Aurora is fully automated. No one ever comes here unless there's an emergency." "And this qualifies as an emergency?" Alex asked with a nervous laugh. Didn't answer. Her mind was already racing ahead, thinking about what they would face once they were inside. The enzyme they needed was stored deep within the station, but getting to it wouldn't be easy. Automated systems meant security measures, cameras, drones, and locked doors, all designed to keep intruders out. As the shuttle docked with a soft thud, powered down the engines and turned to Alex. "Stay close to me," she said firmly, "and don't touch anything unless I tell you to." Alex nodded, swallowing hard. He wasn't used to this kind of danger, and it showed in the way his hands trembled slightly as he unfastened his. Together, they stepped out of the shuttle and into the airlock connecting them to the Aurora. The hiss of pressurized air filled the small chamber as the outer door sealed shut behind them. When the inner door slid open, They found themselves in a narrow corridor bathed in dim blue light. The walls were lined with panels displaying rows of data and blinking indicators, but there was no sign of life or movement. Pulled out her handheld scanner and activated it, its screen lighting up with a map of the station, overlaid with a blinking red dot indicating the location of the enzyme. "This way," she whispered, motioning for Alex to follow her. They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting beneath their boots. Every few steps, paused to check the scanner, ensuring they were heading in the right direction. They hadn't gone far when the first alarm sounded. A low, droning beep echoed through the corridor, followed by a mechanical voice announcing, "Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols initiated." Cursed under her breath and quickened her pace. "We've got company," she said, glancing over her shoulder. Sure enough, two security drones emerged from a side passage moments later, their red sensors glowing ominously as they locked onto the intruders. "Now what?" Alex asked, his voice rising in panic. He instinctively reached for the plasma cutter strapped to his belt, but stopped him with a firm hand on his arm. "No," she said sharply, "let me handle this." She knelt down and pulled a small device from her backpack, a modified hacking tool she'd brought along just for situations like this. With practiced precision, she connected the device to a nearby terminal and began typing commands into its interface. Her fingers flew across the keys as she exploited a loophole in the drone's programming, targeting the part of their code responsible for decision-making. Seconds felt like hours as the drones hovered closer, their weapons charging ominously. Just as one of them raised its arm to fire, the machines froze mid-motion. Their red sensors flickered once, then went dark. The humming sound that accompanied their movements ceased entirely, leaving only the faint hum of the station's ventilation system. Alex stared at the deactivated drones in disbelief. "How did you do that?" "I've spent years studying robotics," replied, standing up and brushing dust off her knees. "These things aren't as smart as they look." Despite the success, neither of them relaxed. The alarm was still blaring, and they knew more drones could be dispatched at any moment. They pressed onward, following the scanner's signal deeper into the station. The corridors grew narrower and darker, the blue light giving way to harsh white fluorescence that buzzed faintly overhead. Finally, they reached the storage unit containing the enzyme. It was secured behind a heavy metal door marked with biohazard warnings. Examined the keypad beside it, frowning at the complex encryption protecting the lock. This wasn't going to be as simple as the drones. "We need a code," she said, turning to Alex. "Can you pull up anything useful on your tablet? Maybe schematics or maintenance logs?" Alex nodded and pulled out his device, tapping furiously at the screen. After a few tense moments, he let out a triumphant "got it," and handed the tablet too. She scanned the information quickly, entering the correct sequence into the keypad. The door clicked open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing shelves stocked with vials labeled with cryptic codes. Grabbed the one marked with the enzyme's designation and held it up to the light. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, its iridescent glow promising hope. "This is it," she said, slipping the vial into a protective case in her backpack. "Let's get out of here." But as they turned to leave, another obstacle awaited them. 3 more drones had arrived, cutting off their escape route. Unlike the earlier models, these were larger and more advanced, equipped with heavier armor and deadlier weapons. Their red sensors locked onto an Alex instantly, and their mechanical voices issued a chilling warning. "Intruders will be neutralized." His heart sank. There was no way she could hack all 3 drones before they opened fire. She glanced at Alex, who looked equally terrified. For a moment, it seemed like their mission and their lives were over. Then, unexpectedly, the drones hesitated. Their sensors flickered, and their movements became jerky and erratic. One of them emitted a high-pitched whine before collapsing to the floor, its systems completely shut down. The other 2 followed suit moments later, their bodies clattering loudly as they hit the ground. "What just happened?" Alex asked, staring at the fallen machines in shock. Frowned, her gaze shifting to the ceiling. "Someone else must have their programming remotely," she said slowly. "But who?" Before either of them could speculate further, a voice crackled over the intercom system. "Dr. Carter, please report to the central control room immediately." Recognized the voice instantly. It belonged to Lieutenant Rachel Dawson, the same officer who had been tasked with intercepting them back on Epsilon 7. But instead of anger or hostility, Rachel's tone was calm and measured, almost sympathetic. "Looks like we're not done yet," murmured, gripping her backpack tightly. "Come on, let's see what she wants." With the drones disabled and no immediate threat looming, they made their way to the central control room. Along the way, couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Why had Rachel intervened? And what did she want from them now? When they finally entered the control room, Rachel was waiting for them, seated at a console surrounded by banks of monitors. She stood up as they approached, her expression unreadable. "You didn't make it easy for me," she said, crossing her arms. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused?" Met her gaze squarely. "If I hadn't come here, the cub would have died, and without the cub, the entire mission is compromised." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples as though trying to ward off a headache. "I know," she admitted reluctantly. "That's why I let you live. But you need to understand something. You can't keep running from the rules forever. Sooner or later, someone's going to hold you accountable." "We'll deal with that when it happens," replied firmly. "Right now, all that matters is saving the cub." Rachel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, take the enzyme and go, but don't expect me to cover for you again." Didn't waste time arguing. She thanked Rachel briefly, then turned to leave, Alex trailing closely behind her. As they exited the control room, she couldn't help but wonder if Rachel's intervention had been an act of kindness or a calculated move to protect herself. Whatever the reason, they had what they came for. Now all they had to do was survive the journey back to Epsilon 7. The journey back to Epsilon 7 began with a sense of cautious optimism, and Alex climbed aboard the shuttle, their hearts still racing from the events aboard the Aurora. The enzyme was safely tucked away in its backpack, its protective case glowing faintly in the dim light of the cabin. For the first time since leaving the outpost, they allowed themselves to believe that their mission might actually succeed. But as powered up the shuttle's engines, her mind returned to the challenges ahead. Getting the enzyme had been difficult, but returning to the outpost would be even harder. General Briggs would not take kindly to their defiance, and the consequences of breaking quarantine could ripple far beyond their immediate situation. Still, there was no turning back now. The cub's life, and possibly the safety of everyone on the mission, depended on their success. As the shuttle detached from the Aurora and drifted into open space, Alex broke the silence. "Do you think Rachel will really keep quiet about this?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Glanced at him briefly before focusing on the controls. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we can't worry about that right now. Our priority is getting back to the outpost." Alex nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely reassured. He glanced out the window, watching as the Aurora grew smaller and smaller in the distance. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly around them, a reminder of how isolated they truly were. The shuttle's navigation system plotted a course for Epsilon 7, guiding them through the asteroid field they had navigated earlier. This time, however, moved more cautiously, keeping an eye out for any signs of pursuit. She didn't trust that their escape from the Aurora would go unnoticed forever. Sooner or later, someone would come looking for answers. Her fears proved justified when a blip appeared on the radar screen, a vessel approaching rapidly from behind. "We've got company," said grimly, tightening her grip on the controls. "Brace yourself." Alex leaned forward, his eyes wide with alarm. "Who is it? Another drone?" "No," replied, her voice tense. "It's one of ours. Looks like the General sent backup." The pursuing ship closed the gap quickly, its sleek design cutting through space with alarming speed. Recognized it immediately. It was a high-speed interceptor craft, faster and more agile than their shuttle. Whoever was piloting it clearly meant business. "Can we outrun them?" Alex asked, gripping the armrests tightly. "Not a chance," said flatly. "They're too fast, we'll have to lose them instead." She adjusted the shuttle's trajectory, veering sharply toward a dense cluster of asteroids. The maneuver caught their pursuer off guard, forcing them to slow down momentarily to avoid collision. Use the opportunity to weave through the rocks, using the natural cover to mask their movements. For several minutes, the two ships danced through the asteroid field, dodging collisions and exchanging bursts of laser fire. Shuttle shuddered violently each time a blast grazed its hull, but she refused to let panic take hold. Instead, she focused on finding weaknesses in her opponent's strategy. "They're trying to box us in," she muttered, scanning the radar for openings. "If we stay here, they'll trap us." "What do we do?" Alex asked, his voice rising in desperation. "We make our own opening," replied, her tone steady despite the chaos around them. She spotted a narrow gap between two massive asteroids and steered the shuttle toward it, knowing the interceptor would struggle to follow. With precise timing, she guided the shuttle through the opening, leaving the pursuing ship scrambling to catch up. The gambit worked. The interceptor collided with one of the asteroids, sending debris flying in all directions. Exhaled sharply, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. "That should buy us some time," she said, checking the monitors to ensure there were no other ships pursuing them. Alex stared at her in amazement. "How do you stay so calm under pressure?" "I don't," admitted with a wry smile. "I just pretend I do." As the shuttle cleared the asteroid field, the barren surface of Epsilon 7 came into view. The outpost was a tiny speck against the rocky landscape, its lights flickering faintly in the darkness. Set a course for the landing pad, her heart pounding with anticipation. They were so close now, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead. "What happens when we get there?" Alex asked, breaking the silence. "We find a way to administer the enzyme to the cub," replied simply. "And then we figure out how to deal with the fallout." Alex nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Still, he trusted. If anyone could pull this off, it was her. The shuttle touched down on the landing pad with a soft thud, its engines powering down as the airlock sealed shut behind them. Slung her backpack over her shoulder and turned to Alex. "Stay close to me," she said firmly, "and don't say anything unless I tell you to." Together, they stepped out of the shuttle and into the cold, sterile corridors of the outpost. The atmosphere inside felt heavier than before, charged with tension and unspoken questions. Led the way to the medical bay, her footsteps echoing softly against the metal floors. When they entered the room, the cub lay motionless on the examination table, its breathing shallow and uneven. Approached it slowly, her heart aching at the sight of its weakened state. She opened her backpack and carefully removed the vial containing the enzyme, holding it up to the light. "This is it," she whispered, injecting the enzyme directly into the cub's bloodstream. "Come on, little one, fight." For a moment, nothing happened. The cub remained still, its chest rising and falling weakly. Then, almost imperceptibly, its breathing steadied. Its fur began to regain some of its former luster, and its eyes fluttered open, gazing up with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. "It's working," Alex breathed, his voice filled with awe. Nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's going to be okay." Before they could celebrate, the door to the medical bay slid open with a hiss. General Briggs stepped inside, his face red with anger. Behind him stood Lieutenant Rachel Dawson, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You've caused quite a mess, Doctor," Briggs growled, glaring at. "You broke every rule we had. Do you have any idea what this means for the mission?" Met his gaze squarely, her voice calm but firm. "I saved the cub, and in doing so I protected everyone here. Without it, we'd be blind to the dangers of this planet. Tell me, General, what's more important, rules or lives?" Briggs clenched his jaw, his nose twitching involuntarily. For a long moment he said nothing, his expression unreadable. Finally, he let out a frustrated sigh and turned to leave. "We'll discuss your punishment later," he muttered. "For now, clean up this mess." Rachel lingered for a second longer, giving a small nod before following the general out of the room. The tension in the air eased slightly, though knew the fight wasn't over yet. She turned back to the cub, running her fingers gently through its fur. "You're going to be okay," she murmured softly. "All of us are." As the outpost settled back into routine, the bond between the humans and the cub grew stronger than ever. In the vast emptiness of space, even the smallest act of defiance could make all the difference. The outpost was quiet, its sterile halls bathed in the faint hum of machinery. Stood in the medical bay, her eyes fixed on the cub as it lay on the examination table. Its breathing had steadied, and its golden fur shimmered faintly under the soft lights. The enzyme was working, better than she had dared to hope. But the calm in the room felt fragile, like a thin sheet of ice over turbulent waters. She knew the storm wasn't over yet. Alex lingered nearby, his hands shoved into his pockets. He glanced at occasionally, unsure of what to say. The weight of what they had done hung heavy in the air. They had broken quarantine orders and risked everything for the sake of the cub. Now they had to face the consequences. General Briggs paced outside the medical bay, his boots clicking sharply against the metal floor. His nose twitched with every step, a nervous tic that betrayed his frustration. Lieutenant Rachel Dawson stood beside him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of something softer in her eyes, sympathy, perhaps, or admiration for his determination. "We can't let this go unpunished," Briggs muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "This sets a dangerous precedent." Rachel hesitated before speaking. "Sir, I understand your concerns, but you have to admit Dr. Carter saved the mission. If she hadn't acted, we'd be facing a much bigger problem right now." Briggs stopped packing and turned to glare at her. "Are you defending her?" "No," Rachel replied quickly, though her tone remained steady. "I'm just saying maybe we should focus on what matters most. The cub is alive. That means our early warning system is intact. Isn't that worth something?" Briggs didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared through the window into the medical bay, watching as gently stroked the cub's head. For all his bluster and authority, he couldn't deny the bond between the humans and the creature. It wasn't just a tool, it was family. And deep down, he knew that losing it would have been a blow to morale none of them could afford. Finally, he sighed and rubbed his temples. "Fine," he said gruffly, "but I still need answers. Bring her to the command center. We'll deal with this properly." Followed Rachel and Alex into the command center, her heart pounding as she stepped into the room. The space was dominated by a large circular table surrounded by monitors displaying data from the outpost systems. Briggs stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He glared at as she entered, his jaw clenched. "Dr. Carter," he began, his voice sharp enough to cut steel, "you've put this entire mission at risk. Breaking quarantine isn't just a violation of protocol, it's a crime. Do you understand that?" Met his gaze squarely, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, sir, I do." "Then explain yourself," Briggs demanded. "Why did you think you had the right to disobey direct orders, to jeopardize everyone here for the sake of one animal?" "It's not just an animal," replied, her tone unwavering. "It's part of our survival system. Without the cub, we wouldn't know if toxins were present in the atmosphere. Losing it would have endangered every single person on this mission, including you." Briggs opened his mouth to argue, but Rachel interrupted before he could speak. "She's right, sir. The Cub's role is critical, and without Dr. Carter's actions, we'd be in serious trouble right now. Briggs shot her a sharp look, but Rachel didn't flinch. Instead, she continued, her voice steady. "Sir, I think we need to consider the bigger picture here. Yes, rules were broken, but sometimes breaking rules is necessary to protect lives. Isn't that why we're here, to survive no matter the cost?" The room fell silent as Briggs considered her words. His nose twitched again and he looked away, his expression conflicted. Finally, he let out a long sigh and turned back to. "You realize this doesn't excuse your actions," he said, his voice quieter now. "You broke 3 laws of interstellar conduct. You put everyone at risk, and you've set a dangerous example for the rest of the crew." "I understand," replied. "But I also know that following rules blindly doesn't always lead to the right outcome. Sometimes, doing the right thing means taking risks, even when those risks might get you into trouble." Briggs studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well, here. What's going to happen? You'll receive a formal reprimand in your file. There will be no further disciplinary action for now. But if anything like this happens again, the consequences will be severe. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir," said, relief washing over her. "Thank you." Briggs dismissed them with a wave of his hand, retreating to his office without another word. Rachel lingered behind, giving a small smile before leaving. "Good job," she whispered as she passed. Back in the medical bay, knelt beside the cub, running her fingers gently through its fur. It purred softly, its eyes half closed in contentment. Alex stood nearby, leaning against the wall. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "what happens now?" Smiled faintly. "We keep going, we finish the mission, and we remember why we're here, to survive together." Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Do you think the General will ever forgive us?" "I don't know," admitted. "But forgiveness isn't the point. What matters is that we did what was necessary, and we made it work." As the hours passed, the outpost settled back into its routine. The tension eased, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. The crew gathered around the medical bay, marveling at the cub's recovery. It wasn't just an animal anymore. It was a symbol of their resilience, their determination to survive no matter the odds. Outside, the twin moons of Epsilon 7 rose above the horizon, casting their pale light over the barren landscape. Inside the outpost, the bond between the humans and the cub grew stronger than ever. In the vast emptiness of space, even the smallest act of defiance could make all the difference. And for Alex and the rest of the crew, that fragile hope was enough to keep them going, one day at a time.